the 24 Hours of Daytona. The Motorcycle Ice Race Championship is wrapped up, and a horsepower extravaganza rocks Atlanta. All this and more today on television's fastest half hour.
The way the people that they seem to put their helmet on and their brain goes into neutral, and here we'll see a car actually running down the apron in a minute, and the guy just sort of is in the wrong part of the track. For no reason at all, he seems to think he's got to get the lead right at the very start of the race, and there we see just the end of an incident, which is so stupid.
Bad day for a lot of people on the first lap, but it didn't take long for the pole sitter in this race, Bob Wallach, to move out front. He qualified 4 seconds faster than the rest of the field, and he held the lead during the early running. But then it was the pole-sitting machine giving up the lead because the team of John Osteen, along with Bob Aiken and Dale Whittington, came into play and took over the lead. They passed and took on the advantage. And next, it was the Jaguars' turn. The number 44 machine right there, moving out front. That's Bob Tullius at the controls. He's a veteran of Daytona. But the old reliable number 86 of Hurley Haywood wasn't long in asserting himself. He's won more 24 hours than any other driver, and he put that machine out front, literally running away from everyone until he came in for his pit stop. He did not give up the lead. Hurley Haywood staying back out front. Now, if you've been watching the past 2.5 hours here, you know that TBS Sports has exclusive live coverage of the 24 hours. We're going to check in now with one of America's foremost broadcasters of motorsports, our executive producer, Ken Squire, and a special guest live from Daytona International.
Thank you, David. Here at the Daytona International Speedway, Bill France Sr., the man who built the track, created this 24-hour race and all the other trimmings of Speed Weeks here at Daytona Beach, Florida. And this morning, the Organization of American States met. We understand they are going to take a far more important role in motorsports in the Western Hemisphere, Bill.
Well, it's sports of all kinds, but because Ambassador Middendorf was here this morning, as you know, for the 10,000-meter run, and we had quite a discussion. They're all impressed with the fact that the Argentine driver's up here and the entire committee, which composed of Mr. Fuller.
Will there be more of an interchange between the countries, Bill, in the Western Hemisphere?
We're really going to make a big effort through motorsports, which is very popular in many of those countries in this hemisphere, to improve the relationships, and I'm very enthusiastic about the meeting. I can't talk much more about it at the moment.
What kind of cars? Bill France, what kind of cars would you be thinking?
The Toyota team. Transmission trouble in the first car, driven by actor Gene Hackman. The car you see on your screen now has rear-end problems they're attempting to fix. The Interscope team replaced the steering gear for Bill Whittington. He's back on course. This is Camel GT champion John Paul Jr. Your car was just in, and the pit stop looked routine.
Yeah, it was. We're on our second stop. We're starting to go for the third hour here, and looking good.
You look awful nervous fidgeting around the pits. Is it tougher standing here watching than it is being in the car?
Well, we're second place right now. When you're up in the front, you get a little bit nervous because you're wondering when your problem's going to happen. Everyone else has had quite serious problems already. There's not too many cars really running up front now.
Will you sleep at all during this 24 hours?
Well, you try to get sleep. It's really hard to get your mind totally away from it, but you try and listen to what's going on and just close your eyes.
I spoke with John Osteen, the driver of the Bob Aiken car. The right rear tire let go without warning on the banking, and he crashed and hit the wall. He is all right. The car is done for the day. Ken?
Now, those drivers are chasing a checkered flag still 2,000 long racing miles away, but one guy is already savoring his Daytona victory for this year. And that, of course, came in the Champion Spark Plug Challenge for RS cars. We're going to take a look at some of those taped highlights now. More than 50 cars took the green flag in this one, but most of those 50 were quickly left in the dust as pole winner Dave Jolly pulled away from the field.
The Daytona International Speedway, about 2 hours, 20 minutes into the race, I'm with David Hobbs, and for the first time in 7 years since BMW knocked off the Porsche Thort, here today we're seeing Jaguar running very well until just this moment. The Jaguar has just made an unscheduled stop after it had been leading by as much as 36 seconds.
Yeah, he was going extremely well, but it's got a split wheel bearing or something, and they're trying to change that on the front, which obviously will take some time. It's been a race of tremendous attrition, really. Although the front runners have not, many of them have actually dropped out. We've had an awful lot of stops. The Bruce Levin car stopped for a long time. The John Paul car is the only one to keep going so far.
Castellano is now in the John Paul car, and he has appropriated first place. Car number 11, the Foyt and Waltrip car, is back in the pits, that Aston Martin machine. But the big surprise, too, is the March. Now, that's the Bobby Rahal car of a year ago. Randy Lanier has put that March up into second position. Let's go back to the Mazda Firestone Performance Center, and once again, Dave Despain.
10-mile missiles out there today, but those old stock car races up and down the beach gave birth to an annual rite of spring. Speed Weeks here at Daytona. The opening of Daytona International Speedway introduced a new era to stock car competition, and with it came a changing of the guard. One of the original legends of the sport, Lee Petty's career ended a year after the Speedway opened. He and Johnny Beauchamp sailed over the fence, but since that fateful day, Lee's son Richard has won a record 7 Daytona 500s, taking the checkered flag. Stock cars, the meat and potatoes of Speed Week for 25 years, and they'll invade the Speedway right after the checkers fall tomorrow on the 24 hours. The countdown to history's first $1 million stock car race, the 83 Daytona 500, begins next weekend. All qualifying, the 20-lap, $50,000 to win Busch Clash, and the ARCA 200 all next Sunday. The Silver Anniversary 500 will run 2 weeks from tomorrow. The Speed Week finale, the 42nd running of motorcycle racing's Daytona 200 on Sunday, March 13th. That's another exclusive TBS Sports telecast. We'll have live flag-to-flag coverage of all the 180-mile-per-hour action in this, the world's richest bike race. Now, the guy on the yellow bike, Kenny Roberts, he's another of Daytona's great racing heroes and a big favorite in the 200-miler. He does most of his motorcycle racing in Europe. There he is, twice American national champion, since won 3 world titles. But the man who lapped the field in the 78 200 remembers his roots.
You know, Europe has been a big success for me, and the World Championship means a lot.
Had 4 laps in the pits, and they have fallen back. They are out of the top 7. That tells you how close this endurance race is going at the present time. The man who is out in front is Castellano, who is driving with John Paul Jr., the number 1 car. That's one of the Porsche Turbo 935s. And his biggest story is the March. That's the Randy Lanier car, and that car is running in second position at this time. Another big story coming up as we check the leaderboard. Al Hulbert has pulled number 86. He's with Hurley Haywood, Bruce Levin. They're up to third position. And Bruce Felton, he's pulled himself along. Oh, late change. Just now, Carson Baird has come into 5th position. Now, that's the Ferrari, the Berlinetta 512. They are on the move in that car that took 6 at Le Mans a year ago. David Hobbs, a final thought from you here.
Well, that Ferrari could still win this race yet. It's the only other V12 engine in the car, in the race apart from the Jaguar. But certainly the Jaguar is not down and out. It's running very strongly. It was just one of those silly things that happens to racing cars from time to time that put it 4 laps down. Very unfortunate for them. But it has been run, as Derek said.
Out here for the Daytona 500, there are 2 questions. One, of course, who's on the pole, and the other is, by how much are they going to break the old track record, Ned?
Ken, I believe it'll be by at least a couple of miles an hour. Benny Parsons ran 196 plus last year to win the Busch pole, but with increase in horsepower, better tires, Goodyear has a new tire here that's working exceptionally well for them, and the better aerodynamic design on the car, particularly the Chevrolets with that slope front end. I think they're going to run faster.
Well, one of the favorites they're talking about, the man who's done so much testing down here of recent, Junior Johnson, the car of Darrell Waltrip that sat on the pole 7 times last year. They are one of the favorites, and of course there's a couple of others out here.
Yes, in fact, there are several others, Ken. You certainly can't leave that team out. I think they've come here really loaded for bear because they haven't won a pole here in a long time. Waddell Wilson, though, is the man to beat. Hale Yarborough will be driving that car number 28 this year. Waddell's cars have sat on the poles the last 4 years here at Daytona, and he wants to make it 5 in a row. But there's a fellow from up in your part of the country that's going to be tough, too.
Indeed, Jeff Bodine. Ken Bingham is the engine builder. They're coming with the same equipment, same crew they had a year ago, and they sit on the pole for the Firecracker 400 as well as for Talladega. And they were 2 miles an hour faster on the super speedway than anyone else. Many say the Cliff Stewart car will be the big surprise. Now let's go back to Atlanta to MotorWeek Illustrated and Dave Despain.
Time ever Clash drivers are allowed to use a different car than they'll run in the Daytona 500. The result of proliferation of specially built Clash cars, what Darrell Waltrip calls 25-lap time bombs. $50,000 on the line for the winner. The Clash is still the richest racing per mile anywhere in the country. The field comprised of 15 pole winners from last year's Winston Cup events, plus one so-called wild card entry. Here's last year's dramatic finish, and Bob Varsha will be telling us who's on the pole for that race later today. The ARCA 200 is a 20-year speed.
On a 500 right here on this same track. But the question right now, Darrell Waltrip, is how did you like road racing?
Well, I liked it just fine. I had a lot of fun, and at least I got a stint in the car, a couple hours, and you know, Nimrod, which is the name of the team, it's a biblical term, and it meant long-distance runner. Unfortunately, Nimrod gave out early tonight, or last night, I should say. But it was a lot of fun. I had to do all the night driving, and I'm surprised that AJ's driving in the rain, because there's two things he said he wouldn't do, and that was run at night and run in the rain. So there must be some enticement there for him to be out there.
Apparently he has a better deal than you do. He just hopped out and got in the first place car.
No, actually, I was holding all the money, and I told him if we didn't run long enough, I wasn't going to pay him. He's probably trying to make enough money to pay his expenses for coming down here.
Now, the word we've been hearing this morning is that next year you're back here for the 24, and you're going to get Junior Johnson to crew the car.
AJ and I obviously scoped everything out, and we decided that if we did it ourselves, we could do it better than anybody. And I don't know, you know, it's a year away, but AJ said, we're going to build a car, and we're going to come back down here and show these guys how to do it. Hope you're watching, Junior, because we're going to include you in it, too.
Waltrip and Foyt were early retirees from a race in which attrition was a big part of the story. From the start, it was a tough 24 hours. A first turn, first lap crash got this twice around-the-clock marathon off to a rocky start. Then, one after another, the front runners had difficulties. Bob Aiken's fire engine red Porsche, the beautiful and very fast Jaguar prototype of Bob Tullius Group 44 team, the always tough Porsche piloted by four-time winner Hurley Haywood, Bruce Levin, and Al Holbert, and the defending race champion John Paul Jr., all victimized by mechanical problems or crashes while running up front. Pole sitter Bob Wallach, who qualified 4 seconds faster than the rest of the field, broke a couple of turbochargers early, dropping back to 58th place. But through the night, Wallach and co-driver Claude Bellalena charged back to retake the lead, only to find themselves with a new co-driver. Car owner Preston Henn installed A.J. Foyt in his Porsche's cockpit when A.J.'s car packed up, and an outspoken Bob Wallach told David Hobbs he didn't like it.
I'm upset about it because he doesn't know the car, he doesn't know the rain, he doesn't know anything, and we have been working very hard because we had two turbos broken early on, and we were about 12 laps behind. Now we are 1 lap leading, and Mr. A.J. Foyt is driving for the PR. I'm upset about it.
Wallach's hurt feelings notwithstanding, Foyt proved a great addition to the team. After the first red flag for rain in the history of the 24 hours, Foyt cut the fastest lap of Sunday's running, over 126 miles per hour in the middle of a downpour. And together, he and Wallach built an insurmountable lead. When the checkers fell on this 21st running of the 24-hour Pepsi Challenge, Bob Wallach had a 24-hour victory to soothe his hurt feelings, and for the first time since he won Le Mans in 1967, A.J. Foyt went to a sports car victory lane. A tip of the hat to the team of Pete Halsmer, Robert Reed, and Rick Knoop for their GTO class win. They finished third overall in a Mazda RX-7. In the GTU division, Lee Mueller, Terry Visger, and Hugh McDonough took the class win on street radial tires. And the drivers of this Chevy March, who finished second in the 24-hour, lead the Camel GT standings. For a number of reasons, mostly involving licensing, none of the winning drivers were eligible for points. That's the way the leaders ranked following that Daytona Classic. Well, I'd like to thank everyone who wrote to tell us that you enjoyed the live TBS Sports coverage of the IMSA opener. And we also want to show you highlights of another 100. But most of those were left quickly in the dust as pole winner Dave Jolly pulled away. In the early going, Jolly, driving that red Mazda RX-3, didn't get much breathing space from Craig Ross's black and gold Nissan Sentra or Louis Sirex's red and white Buick Skylark. The racing was just about this close most of the way, with Sirex and then Jolly showing the way. Midway through the race, Sirex took this unplanned excursion through the Daytona Speedway infield. He recovered nicely, mowed down a lot of grass in the process, and came back on the course, only losing 1 position. Ross fell out of contention, but Sirex won the Daytona pole for the 5th straight year. Aided by strong winds on the backstretch, Cale cracks the 200-mile-per-hour barrier at Daytona. 200.503. But watch what happens on Yarborough's second lap. Running even faster, he loses it in turn 4 and disaster strikes. That strong wind lifts that 3,200-pound Monte Carlo like a leaf and tosses it into the wall. One of the most awesome crashes in Daytona history. The CBS television pictures are mind-boggling. The fact that Yarborough walked away testifies to the durability of these cars. Now, that hard crash cost Cale Daytona's first 200-mile-per-hour pole run. Ken Squire picks up the story of the 500 surprise pole winner.
After the Cale Yarborough pyrotechnics had been completed, the man on the pole for the 25th annual Daytona 500 at 198.8 miles per hour was Ricky Rudd. 6th time you've been on the pole, but never more important, you were the big surprise. Were you surprised?
Well, we were a little bit, Ken. We didn't really get the practice time like we wanted to. The weather got to us a little bit. We didn't really know what we had. The team worked all went along on a special qualifying motor to run here. But we really didn't know what it was going to do, simply for the fact that we got behind in practice. The crew worked hard, put the car on the line. They felt like it was their best shot, but we still, up until that time, didn't know how fast it would go.
Did the wind help you? Did it sail you into turn number 3? Yarborough said he went in there about 10 miles an hour faster on the lap when he went over 200 miles per hour.
Well, I knew I was running fast. I didn't really know how fast. I had the tack covered up with tape so I wouldn't look at it and didn't want to scare myself. I knew it was a good lap. I knew that I could really hear the motor really wound up. But it was a go for broke.
In the last row in this chase for a $50,000 pot of gold at the end of a 20-lap rainbow. The first few laps looked like a Ford runaway. Pole sitter Bill Elliott and Dale Earnhardt in a fast draft leaving the field. But on lap 4, defending Clash champ Bobby Allison destroys his new Miller Beer Chevy on the front chute. That was his Daytona 500 car, and that's a big setback in Bobby's quest for a third 500 victory. On the restart, leader Elliott gets mobbed by Darrell Waltrip, Dale Earnhardt, and Bonnet, who'd come from the back with a typical Busch Clash charge. Let's watch close now as Bonnet slips past the edge, slides high in front of Elliott, then low in front of Buddy Baker. They touch, but everybody gets through. Now the real controversy. Earnhardt, third car race in Camel GT history. Rain determined when the race ended, but a mixed-up start had a lot to do with how it ended. While John Fitzpatrick tailgated the pace car, the baby blue Lola of pole sitter John Paul Jr. held the field to a crawl. Now, these two have a history of playing games with each other on Camel GT starts. This time, Fitz stayed out front, promptly got hit with a 30-second penalty for jumping the green flag, while Al Holbert scooted through Fitz's spot and beat Paul to turn 1. That proved to be a big factor. When Fitzpatrick's turbo acted up, Holbert took the lead, and unhampered by spray and traffic, he simply ran away and hid, while Fitzpatrick became a slow-moving roadblock. Frustrated, double-zero Danny Ongaias and others took drastic action, ignored a corner marshal instructions, ducked inside a stopped car. That's pretty questionable. They did not get a penalty, and in fact, Ongaias was able to pass Holbert and take the lead. But that didn't last long either. Ongaias apparently forgot for a moment that it was raining, gets into this corner about 30 miles an hour hot, and pow, he's into the wall. All over for Danny. Ongaias will wobble to the pits. Holbert retakes the lead with Bob Wallach second. Now behind all this, Paul and Fitzpatrick with a dandy battle until Paul nearly buys the farm. Suddenly, the road is filled with Aston Martin. Paul recovers nicely, but all in all, it wasn't his day either. Holbert still in front, the rain gets worse, and finally the pace car has to put the field under yellow flag. Lots of confusion about what to do. Left side of your screen, you'll see 24 Hours of Daytona winner Bob Wallach go to the pits. He assumed there was going to be a restart. It's a bad gamble. The red flag comes out. Wallach on pit road, and promoter Ralph Sanchez explains why they had to call it after 50 miles.
Well, I tried to hold out till the very last minute. But we took a drive with the chief steward on the track, and there are several spots that are just flooded, over a foot of water, and there's no way to get the water out.
Here's the way the field stood when the red came out, and that will stand as the official Miami finish order. Earlier on this rainy day, pole sitter Gene Felton took the GTO main event, and boy, they had a great race at Miami in the GTU division. Go to the highlights. Great Mazda battle. Roger Mandeville in yellow with the daring Lee Mueller. Watch this move by the '81 GTU champ. Unfortunately, Mueller's heroics got him a flat tire. He went limping off to the pits while GTU veteran Mandeville set sail, but never said.
And this event was certainly proof of that. After a long day of slamming and banging and bumping, the main was finally flagged off. Kenny Hopkins was a surprise in his brown number 15 as he shut the door on pole sitter Tom Cochran as Hopkins took the lead at the drop of the main event's green flag. It took 20 laps for Cochran to return the favor, but finally did. Cochran running a very smooth inside line. Finally was able to work his way around Ken Hopkins, but the real drama of the race was unfolding. Nick Finoro Jr. out of the East Coast was running on the high side and passing cars early on in the race at a rate of about a car of lap. He had come up from 17th starting position. Time after time, Finoro would try the high side on this very tricky 1/4 mile oval. Sometimes he made it, sometimes he wouldn't. It took him until the 74th lap until Finoro finally was able to get his way around the runner-up car of Kenny Hopkins. But unfortunately, he obviously did not have enough time to catch the leading Tom Corcoran.
Hunt, Scheckter, Piquet all emerged from the high-pressure series. This year, no fewer than 4 North Americans, headed by Davy Jones, are hoping to follow the same route. The new season started last Sunday at Silverstone, with pre-race favourite Ayrton da Silva of Brazil racing into an immediate lead. He broke the lap record, and that was the last anyone saw of him. But New Yorker Davy Jones flew the US flag high, the ex-Super B youngster contesting second place with the more experienced Britons Martin Brundle and Calvin Fish. Further back, the other 3 Americans, Tommy Gruner of Chicago, Eric Lang from LA, and Canada's Alan Berg, learned their F3 skills. Lang the hard way, spinning out in the process. Berg eventually came home in 10th spot. Brundle got the better of an impressive Jones for second place. Fish was 4th, and Swiss Mario Heighton was 5th. Da Silva is surely on his way to Grand Prix stardom if he learns to pop the champagne corks, and Davy Jones may not be far behind. For MotorWeek Illustrated, from Silverstone.
Classic is often used to describe this race, but this year, classic is an understatement.
A record Sebring field, more than 80 cars took the green flag in a grueling race that was to see 28 lead changes, 8 different leaders, and more plot twists than an Agatha Christie mystery. Preston Henn's Porsche 935 was on the pole with Derek Bell at the wheel, but it never led a lap. Mechanical problems dropped it out early. In the early going, the race was a battle between the Jaguar XJR5 of Bob Tullius, Bill Adam, and Pat Bedard, and the Porsche 935 of Hurley Haywood and Al Holbert. The Jaguar, though, was knocked out before halfway with a blown head gasket. 2 more cars then moved into contention. The Marty Hines, Terry Walters, Randy Lanier March, and the Bob Aiken, John Osteen, Dale Whittington Porsche 935. Those 2 had a dandy duel until the March lost a water hose and his Chevy engine cooked. With 4 hours to go, the Aiken car had it all in the bag, it seemed like, but during a routine pit stop, problems, water-contaminated fuel. Our Jim Roller was there to check out the problem.
Bob, you were so close. Got to be a bitter disappointment.
Well, we had a good handy lead, and then we made a stop, and we refueled the car, and the gas that we bought from Turbo Oil and Gas was full of water, and it just stalled the car. And we had to pump out the water before we could get it started again. So it's just bad gas, and we certainly are not going to buy any more fuel from them again, that's for sure. It cost us the race.
That put the Aiken car more than 14 laps behind. So suddenly, the GTO Mazda of Rick Knoop and Pete Halsmer was in the lead. Several faster cars, which had had problems earlier, tried to run down the Mazda, but for the next 2 hours, it ran flawlessly. Then with a little more than an hour to go, the Mazda went off course and out of the race.
Well, it was just on the first lap of my stint, and something went bang as we were approaching the hairpin in the back, and I lost the brakes, and it looks like the upright has got a problem on the top of the upright, it looks like.
So the Grid Cosworth of Skeeter McKittrick and Milt Minter took over the lead, but that only lasted about 15 minutes. A burned-out wheel bearing stopped them. That put Haywood and Holbert back in the lead, but again, that didn't last long. A bad alternator kept knocking out their lights. That was a tough problem to overcome on the unlit Sebring course.
Isn't it almost impossible to drive with one light? Well, you just let somebody lead. We're not racing really with anybody. If you get a guy that's running close to your time, we just have to keep circulating. So you just let somebody else do the leading. You just follow.
The solution, put in a new battery every 2 laps and just let it fry, and then come in and get another one.
So again, there was a new leader, the unheralded Porsche 934 of Wayne Baker, Jim Mullen, and Keith Nyrock. It took over with just a half an hour to go. The big question, though, was, could it hold off Aiken's 935, which was catching them at the rate of 15 seconds a lap? The new leader was suffering from wheel bearing troubles and a dying transmission, but it managed to hold on. Shortly after 11 o'clock, it came across the line just 94 seconds ahead of Aiken, the first overall Sebring victory ever for one of the smaller engine GTO cars. In victory lane, Jim Roller picks up the ecstatic celebration.
Bob told me you were going to try and turn consistent threes. That strategy worked?
Yeah, they had me down to 152s with a bad wheel bearing and all the way up to 305s. They didn't tell me we're in the lead, though. I just thought we were hanging in there for GTO, which is what we're in here for the points.
Hayward and Holbert hung on for third. An ailing Chevy Monza managed to keep fourth, and the Aston Martin that Darrell Waltrip and A.J. Foyt drove at Daytona took fifth.
In the darkness of Sebring's final lap...
Weekend is the Champion Spark Plug Challenge.
IMSA has moved this small sedan series towards the front-wheel drive models it calls Performance sedans. Cal Shokett, number 6, and Amos Johnson in Performance Mazda GLCs dashed out front early. They battled until Shokett blew a gasket on lap 10, leaving number 7 Johnson alone with a big lead. But the crowd was dazzled by the charge of Dave Frelson. He started 60th. By halfway, it clawed his way up to 5th position. In the last half of the race, he pushed his Nissan Sentra up 2 more spots, but that's as far as he could get as Johnson cruised to Mazda's first ever Performance victory. To get that hard-earned 3rd place...
We asked him why he chose to race in Europe.
We had a choice of trying to do Formula Atlantic this year, or going to the Can-Am route, or coming over here and doing Formula 3, or, you know, we could go all various different ways, but we thought that the best was to come over and do Formula 3 and see what the chances were of going the Formula 1 route.
After a season-opening 3rd place, Jones moved to a rain-swept round 2, but he crashed while battling Calvin Fish for 2nd, and that gave airtime to Silva an easy win. The Formula 3 stars then moved to Silverstone, another downpour, and De Silva made it 3 straight. But Jones finished 4th, and that moves him into a 3rd-place tie in the standings. Also on the card at Silverstone, American spokesman for a group of English and German investors who think they're close to buying the legendary New York racing facility. The bankrupt track officially became the property of the Bank of New York at a recent public auction. Wallace won't say what his group does intend to do with the facility.
For tomorrow's 8th running of the Long Beach Grand Prix, the first centers around the course itself. Construction after last year's race altered this year's course layout. At one point where the new section meets the old course, the cars were being tossed into the air at 160 miles an hour. The drivers banded together and demanded that the course be modified. Race organizers, realizing the danger, have complied with driver demands. But the big talk this weekend is the return of 1980 world champion Alan Jones. Lured out of retirement by the British-based Arrows team, Jones was 13th fastest in Friday's practice session. Fastest on Friday was Frenchman René Arnoux, driving only his 2nd race for his new employer, Ferrari. Following Arnoux' Ferrari Turbo was his 82 teammate Alain Prost in a Renault Turbo. Former motorcycle world champion Johnny Cecotto impressed onlookers, putting his normally aspirated engine 6th fastest on a course Cecotto saw for the first time only Thursday.
Easy victory. Vintage racing, while big in Europe, is just catching on stateside. The competition is hot and heavy, and for businessman Smith, this is just what the doctor ordered.
I just haven't got the time, and I like to drive them. They're pieces of history. I've got a Cooper and a Walker and a Mirage, and what else? 1 or 2 other odds and ends, and they're just great fun, you know. And historic racing in Europe, of course, is a lot more competitive than it is here, but it's getting better here. It's great.
Stone Tire, where we're building radial tires street legal, competition tough, and proving it every week in the nation's toughest motorsports action. Firestone, the word's getting around. And by Old Milwaukee Beer and Old Milwaukee Light, 2 great tasting beers from Old Milwaukee.
America's oldest Formula One race, but this year's running was certainly the last for Formula One machines at that street circuit, and John Watson gave Long Beach something to remember Formula One by. It's getting to be a familiar scenario for John Watson. Neither he nor his McLaren do that well in qualifying, but in the race he charges to the front with the greatest of ease. He did that when he won Detroit and Belgium last year, and when he finished 2nd in Las Vegas. He did it again at Long Beach, only this time it was a lot tougher. He started 11 rows back, and every previous Long Beach winner has been a front row starter. While the McLarens qualified poorly, the opposite was true of the Ferraris. Patrick Tambay won the pole, and his teammate Randy Arnoux started on the outside. In third place was K.K. Rosberg, but he didn't expect to be there for long. The outspoken Rosberg openly bragged that he'd figured a way to jump the start, and that's exactly what he did. Watch as Rosberg times the green light perfectly, skids into the front row, and slams into Arnoux, causing him problems that sent him to the pits. The rest of the field filtered by unscathed in an unusually slow, safe start at Long Beach, but that only put John Watson farther behind. About then, Watson thought the situation was hopeless. Up front, Rosberg was giving him a helping hand with more wild driving. He nearly nails Tambay with his perfect double dip, and later completes his single-handed elimination of Team Ferrari with this shovel shot. Rosberg himself finally went to the showers when his own teammate Jacques Lafitte and Jean-Pierre Jarier squeezed him off the track. Meanwhile, Watson and his teammate Niki Lauda ran in formation up through the field. Watson was unstoppable. He passed Lauda, then closed in on leader Lafitte, and on lap 45, Watson took the lead. Watson credited the right tire choice with getting him going 4 seconds a lap faster than he qualified. While Lafitte's tires faded, Eddie Cheever and Arnoux pressed him for third. Arnoux, coming back from 2 pit stops, took third when Cheever broke his gearbox and then dropped out. Up front, Watson was all alone. Lauda was slowed by a leg cramp, so he was content just to... What's happened in those two towns is enough to strike terror into the hearts of Formula One's masterminds. Last July, the inaugural Cleveland 500, a huge crowd in a very competitive IndyCar race at the downtown airport. This February, the Miami Grand Prix. Only a downpour kept most of an expected crowd of 100,000 indoors for an IMSA GT Classic. Both races featured 2 things Formula One can't provide: wheel-to-wheel racing and an affordable cost. Cleveland and Miami disproved the myth that only Formula One can draw big crowds downtown. Out in Long Beach, organizer Chris Pook spelled it out to Formula One: get competitive on price or he'd follow Cleveland's lead and run Indy cars. Formula One wouldn't bargain, so Long Beach goes IndyCar racing in '84. At Las Vegas, the timetable is even more accelerated. They'll see the cheaper Indy cars this fall. Face it, the Formula One calendar is falling apart, and Chris Pook notes that only England, France, Germany, and Italy can claim healthy Grand Prix. And he says that's only because those organizers get a price break from Formula One. Outside Europe, organizers not only have to put up bigger purses, they also have to pay all the transportation and expenses of the huge Formula One entourage. The bottom line, $3 to $10 million. It's no wonder races like those in the U.S., South Africa, and South America are going away. Maybe Formula One can live with that, but can their sponsors? Virtually all those multi-million-dollar F1 sponsors are multinational companies, and without worldwide exposure, they won't be around long. F1 boss Bernie Ecclestone says cities are waiting in line to get Grand Prix. He says Miami is one of those cities, but our sources at the Miami Grand Prix say that when Bernie Ecclestone talks, nobody listens. I think the guild has gone off the lily for Formula One, Dave.
Well, Jerry, for all the problems faced by a lot of Formula One starting grids, his McLaren doesn't seem to be much of a qualifier. But throw the green and Watson comes to life. At Detroit last year, he came from 17th starting spot to win. In Belgium, he won from 14th spot, and at Las Vegas, from the back of the pack to finish second. Last Sunday's victory celebration at the Long Beach Grand Prix was Watson's coup de grace. On the track where everyone agrees it's impossible to pass, he came from 22nd place to win the race, and in the long and glorious history of Formula One, no one has ever come from so far back. An old pit cliche says, if you ain't passing, it ain't racing. Well, for passing everybody in sight at the Long Beach Grand Prix, John Watson is our champion racer of the week. Well, that Americans raced motorcycles. Then Californian Kenny Roberts showed up and won 3 straight world titles. In this, his final European season, King Kenny looking over his shoulder for an heir apparent, and lo and behold, he sees fellow American 21-year-old Freddie Spencer, Shreveport, Louisiana. They own the first 2 starting spots at Le Mans. The traditional push start and disaster for another American. On the right side of your screen, the back markers play duck pins, and boom, Randy Mamola out of the race in the first 10 feet. Rocket Ron Haslam, Spencer, and Marco Lucanelli take the lead through turn 1. Then the long and lanky Spencer shows why they call him Fast Freddy. Using his right knee as an outrigger, Spencer ducks inside Haslam and takes the lead. Meanwhile, the newest American threat to the established Grand Prix stars, rookie Eddie Lawson, the Yamaha teammate of Kenny Roberts, broke a handlebar on that aborted start. He's very unhappy. Now, when Honda introduced a 3-cylinder Grand Prix machine, people scoffed. They weren't laughing Sunday. Freddie Spencer found himself looking around for somebody to race with, and it didn't take long to find him. At the age of 30, Kenny Roberts is alive and well. A move on Ron Haslam, and Roberts is into second place. Plagued by injuries and mechanical problems of late, King Kenny really wants to close his career with a 4th title. Now, here's Randy Momola out of the race along with defending world champ Franco Uncini. These guys running 137-mile-an-hour average. Roberts, master of the high-speed sweeper, breathtaking outside move on Spencer. Kenny Roberts into the lead. I confess, I'm a Roberts fan. I'd like to see him get that 4th title, but Sunday was a setback. Shortly after that pass, his exhaust broke and he fell back, returning supremacy to Freddie Spencer. And supremacy is just the word. That flawless style carried Freddie to victory in the season-opening GP in South Africa, and he spent most of Easter Sunday perfecting that over-the-shoulder glance. Roberts struggled to an eventual 4th place. Here he temporarily loses that spot to factory Yamaha teammate, former World Endurance champ Mark Fonchan. Time champ Emerson Fittipaldi. Jim Roller has the story.
This is the second trip in 3 weeks to the Thruxton Airport circuit for the British Formula 3 stars. And Brazilian sensation Ayrton Senna, the only man to win in this young 83 season, was yet again on the pole. But this time, Senna, fighting the flu, botched the start. That allowed America's young international hopeful, Davy Jones, to sprint to the front. However, it only took Senna 3 laps to hunt down Jones and retake the lead. Then Martin Brundle got by Jones, starting a dogfight that lasted until Jones spun out. He got back to the pits, but was out of the race. That left Senna to take the win with Brundle second. That's the 5th straight time that those two have run 1-2, but Senna insists he is beatable.
Of course, nobody is unbeatable. Never, no one is Jesus Christ. Everybody does mistake. I'm not a computer.
In the day's Formula 2 feature, Mike Thackwell started on the pole and quickly left the field in his dust. By lap 6, the New Zealand Charger had pulled out a 6-second lead. But behind him, Beppe Gabbiani, winner of the season opener, and his red and white number 1 was rocketing through the field. Starting 8th, the Italian veteran quickly moved to 3rd, then went to work on Stefan Beloff in the black number 4. When Beloff's tires wore out, Gabbiani slipped by into 2nd place and sat out after the leader, Thackwell. By this point, Thackwell had built up a fat cushion. But to build up that lead, he had used up his tires on his blue and white Ralt. By the halfway point, Gabbiani was able to close within striking distance. Then lap 37 of this 55-lapper saw Gabbiani snatch the lead with this daring outbraking maneuver. From that point, the ex-Formula 1 racer was never headed. Gabbiani built up his lead over the closing stages to take his 2nd win of the season. Thackwell was able to hold on to 2nd despite pressure from Gabbiani's teammate, ex-Formula 3 star Alain Ferté. For MotorWeek Illustrated, this is Jim Roller reporting.
Countryside for 4 long days. Finland's Ari Vatanen took the win after Vic Preston, the leader, crashed in the late stages of the race. 2nd place Mikkola came back from 38th place in the early going and holds a 28-point series lead over woman rallyist Michelle Mouton. Meanwhile, the Classic closed next Friday and are approaching last year's record of over 100 cars. A lot of big-name Indy rookies this year, the likes of John Paul Jr., Al Unser Jr., Italian Teo Fabi, and dirt tracker Sammy Swindell are going through the required rookie orientation program. It's shaping up as a heck of a month of May in Indianapolis. But there is one sad note on the 500 scene. Pat Vadan died last week in Portland, Oregon, following a short illness. For many years, Vadan was the colorful flagman presiding over the 500. He also waved the green for the United States Auto Club and American Motorcyclist Association. In his spare time, Pat was a trapeze artist, a motorcycle stuntman, and an accomplished cartoonist. Is at Road Atlanta this weekend, and it's the swan song of the factory Ford Mustang road racer, soon to be replaced by a new GTP class race car. Leading the Mustang assault on Road Atlanta, Bobby Rahal, veteran road racer and 1982 IndyCar Rookie of the Year. MotorWeek's Jerry Garrett talked to him.
1982 was a tremendous season for Bobby Rahal. At the end of the season, people were calling Bobby an 8-year overnight success. That isn't really the case, though, is it, Bobby?
Well, I think that, everybody sees the success that you've had in 1 year and wonders, where you've come from. As you know, and a lot of people know, there's been a lot of years that's taken to get to this point, but however long it took, it's great having a year like last year.
Well, your kart season was outstanding.
Do you think it paid off with this Ford drive you've got this year?
Well, I think certainly it helped. It's not very often that you have two what I would call great situations. One is our Red Roof team, in the IndyCar. We have a tremendous team there. And the other is getting involved with IMSA racing, which I enjoy, with a company like Ford.
The Road Atlanta race is actually the swan song for the Mustang, as I understand. Do you have a few tricks for people with this car?
Well, I don't know if we have any tricks or not. I think, we're going to run hard, I think, and try to just sort of wear the opposition out. Certainly the car has had, I think, a bum reputation in terms of its reliability. Having driven it in tests, and I found the car to be extremely reliable, particularly the engine. So I think we've got something to prove, and that is to show the world that this Mustang is and was a great car, and we can do that by winning. This weekend we've got Tom Gloy joining me, and Tom is an old competitor from Formula Atlantic days, and he's a good heady driver. And of course the other car has Jeff Brabham, who's a good heady driver, and Tim Kokona. So I suspect that maybe our toughest competition is going to come from our teammates.
Here at Rainy Road Atlanta today, if Ray Hall's prediction is going to be right, their Mustangs are going to have to do it in the race because they sure didn't do it in qualifying. On the pole is Dale Whittington. On the outside pole is Doc Bundy. Now, the Whittingtons on the track, and Doc Bundy teaches a driver's school here, so they obviously know their way around the track. The second row is Jim Adams and Chris Cord in the Lola, and John Paul Jr. and Rennie Rodriguez in their Porsche. Now, for a report on the rest of the racing action around the country, let's go to Bob Varsha.
IMSA scoring officials have just completed.
And them, JR's teammate, Gordy Johncock, in one of the few recognizable combinations in the lineup. Then Tom Sneva in a new March. Al Unser in another one of those off-color Penske cars. Whatever happened to good old Penske blue? And Mario Andretti and Paul Newman's red and white Bud Lola. The Indy cars were supposed to be slower this year, but don't tell Mears and Rutherford that. They both broke the track qualifying record. At the start of the race, Mears jumped into the lead, running speeds over 200 miles an hour with Rutherford right behind him. On lap 9, Bobby Rahal in the day's only crash, the right front suspension collapsed, and Derek Daly ran into one of Rahal's tires when he spun, and it knocked a wheel off. Mears was unstoppable until his turn for pit service came on lap 52, and he gave the lead to Rutherford. As it turned out, pit road was the one place you didn't want to visit in this race, especially if you were a front runner. Now watch as Rutherford makes his pit stop. The engine starts to smoke, the wheels lock, and JR's done for the day. Then it's Sneva's turn. He never leaves pit road. Johncock's in the lead now, but watch what happens as he crawls in. The transmission locks up and he spins. The engine quits. It takes better than 2 minutes to get him back out of pit road again. He looks to be out of it. That puts Mears back in the lead, and another one of those nasty and Mears loses 6 laps to an electrical failure. So Mike Mosley goes into the lead. That's where he stays until his pit stop with 24 laps left. The stop looks routine, but then trouble with the gearbox. It's stuck in high gear and won't start. Mosley, wiping away tears of frustration, is done too. Now that gives the lead back to, of all people, Johncock. Now he's got one more pit stop to make, but it's routine, the first one of the day, and with all the pit stops finally out of the way, it's an even...
Drivers as friends. So plenty of Franks were shelled out Sunday to see the home country heroes. Frenchman Alain Prost responded by winning the pole in a French Renault. Prost's Renault teammate, the American-born Eddie Cheever, second fastest, thanks to a little nationalist intervention. The quickest man in Friday's qualifying was the Italian driver, Andre de Cesaris. But French officials disqualified him, claiming his onboard fire extinguishers were empty, creating a weight discrepancy. De Cesaris didn't want to hear about 2 French cars on the front row. But the big talk in the pits centered on pit stops. Every major team would start the race on soft compound tires and half-full fuel tanks with a mid-race stop plan to replenish both. The other major story, turbo power. Paul Ricard's circuit's long straightaways complemented the more powerful turbocharged engines. Reliability was the question. Would the turbos last? The top 11 qualifiers were turbo-powered, and on the long start-finish straightaway, they quickly showed supremacy. Prost jumps out in front as 81 world champ Nelson Piquet sandwiches his Brabham ahead of Cheever in the other Renault. Cheever repasses Piquet a few laps later, and the French crowd cheers the home country cars running 1-2 ahead of the British Brabhams. The leader Prost in at mid-race for a scheduled stop. That hands the lead to the Brazilian Nelson Piquet. Meanwhile, in midfield, Mauro Baldi loses control of his Euro Racing Alpha, his suspension beyond repair. Now it's the leader Piquet in for his stop, and that hands the lead back to Alain Prost. Prost, now on fresh tires, his turbo Renault working to perfection, pulls away from the field. A French car on French tires with a French driver wins the French Grand Prix. Vive la France. Piquet hangs on for second, Cheever third, world champ Rosberg the top non-turbo car. Piquet's runner-up finish gives him the point lead. Prost's win moves him into a tie for third. At Willow Springs, California, the whole story was in the front row. 1982 Super V champion Michael Andretti sprinted to the front, chased by the pole sitter in yellow, Roberto Moreno. As the rest of the field scrambled to keep up with that lead duo, the young American and the highly touted Brazilian waged a tight battle that saw the fur flying and the tire smoke rolling. Well, that battle lasted until lap 12 when Moreno moved around Andretti and assumed a lead he would never relinquish. Moreno has made infrequent appearances in this series in the past, but he's signed on for the full 83 campaign, and he'll be tough. At the end of this 40-lapper, he'd pulled out 7.5 seconds on Mario Andretti's talented son. Former Indy 500 Rookie of the Year, Jose Legarza, cracks the top 5. That series is at Riverside, California this weekend.
The duo of Andretti and Foyt were among the fastest in Friday's practice session. Official time qualifying is going on right now with the team of Al Holbert and Hurley Haywood fastest so far. And Mario's son Michael has the pole position for this afternoon's Formula Mondiale race. Back east, Ricky Rudd has the pole for Sunday's NASCAR.
MotorWeek Illustrated was brought to you by Old Milwaukee Beer and Old Milwaukee Light, two great-tasting beers from Old Milwaukee. And by Dodge, America's largest line of front-wheel drive cars, makers of the new Dodge 600 ES, America's driving machines.
At over 202 miles an hour on this mammoth 2.66-mile Alabama International Motor Speedway, everyone knew that the pace was going to be fast and furious in the Winston 500. As the green flag dropped, Yarborough moved into the lead, but car number 88, Jeff Bodine, moved into the battle, and he was to be contended with for a good portion of the race. The Fords of Buddy Baker and Dale Earnhardt also came on strong as they battled for the front position and managed to take it away from Bodine. But then Mark Martin blew the engine in his car number 6, the first time he's driven this car this year. Everybody came into the pits. Bobby Allison didn't get out of the pits too quickly as they let the jack down. The universal joint popped. He lost 3 laps in the pits, killing any chances he had of winning this race. They battled back and forth up front. Tremendous lead draft. But then on lap 72, there was a 9-car crash in the first turn. Phil Parsons, a rookie, tumbled over and over again in his Skoll brother car number 66. After the dust settled, Darrell Waltrip, David Pearson, A.J. Foyt, Cale Yarborough, Jody Ridley, Kyle Petty, and Tim Richmond and Ricky Rudd were all involved in that tremendous crash. Rudd was able to continue even though Parsons' car had come down on top of his, but as you can see, they had to do a lot of sheet metal work on the car, but they did keep him in the race. After the green flew again, it was Richard Petty and Jeff Bodine as they traded the lead in car number 88 and car number 43 and really treated the fans some real fine racing. Bodine then had to go to the pits when the engine started skipping on his Gatorade car number 88. He was out of it for the day. There were less than 10 laps to go when we knew it was going to be a mad scramble to the end. Richard Petty had come out of the pits first. Was that the right place to be? He took the white flag in the lead and wondered if he really was in the right position.
We got lucky that the car out-handled Benny's and the number 1 just enough that I could run wide open through 3 and 4, and I got just far enough ahead of Benny on the last lap that when
contest. Picturesque Laguna Seca Raceway hosted a 100-mile Camel GT sprint race. Al Holbert's red and white March had the pole, and from the start he made it look easy. In the early going, Holbert was chased by the red number 41 of Chris Cord, but clearly dominant, the series point leader pushed his Chevy-powered machine further and further ahead. Holbert very strong. Bob Tullius moved his Jaguar, winner at Road Atlanta 3 weeks ago, into second spot, and Bobby Rahal scrambled back into third place after his Mustang was black flagged earlier for jumping the start. That was the last IMSA appearance for the Mustang. Its replacement, a new Ford GTP car, will be unveiled on Motor Week in early June. Now, Bruce Jenner, decathlon and television star, spins in front of Sebring winner Wayne Baker, who collects the Armco trying to avoid that mess. Both those cars limped back to the pits, but only Baker was able to continue. Meanwhile, in this one, Holbert was the whole story as he weaved through traffic and won his second event of the season. He averaged a record-setting 106 miles per hour over that difficult, demanding 1.9-mile course. Tullius and Rahal joined him on the victory rostrum, while the GTO class win went to Diego Montoya in an M1 BMW. GTU division to Dutch newcomer Boy Hay in a BMW 320i, formerly raced by David Hobbs. And in the Renault Cup race at Laguna, Roy Kong beat Bob Lesnet and Mitch Wright to the checkered flag. Now, the Champion Spark Plug Challenge action, which saw Joe Vardy push his blue Dodge Charger, looking for its third straight win to the early lead. But Cal Choquette and his Mazda GLC number 99 right there in hot pursuit of Vardy. Choquette was finally able to get by as those two picked up their duel right where they left off in the last round at Riverside. But when Choquette's engine expired, Vardy was left all alone out front. Little Joe wasn't content to coast, however, as he lapped all but 8 of the 31 entries. No doubt that Vardy is the dominant force in the Champion Spark Plug Challenge Series, at least for now. Amos Johnson took up the GLC colors as he came home in second place in a Mazda. Moviegoers, Datsun driver Paul Newman. He'll tolerate the distractions of the paparazzi and the curious to campaign this entire series in a turbo. Meanwhile, Trans Am regular Tom Gloy was beaming ear-to-ear on race day. His Lane Sports Prepared Factory Capri was on the pole. Gloy is teamed up for the 83 campaign with Lynn St. James. Willie T. Ribbs, meanwhile, paired with veteran David Hobbs, and he had some mixed feelings about the racetrack.
In a way, we shouldn't really be racing here. It's not really a professional racetrack. It's very narrow. It's too narrow for these big cars. And the runoff area leaves a lot to be desired, but it is good fun to drive on, and being a professional driver, I'm paid to come here, and now I'm here, so I'm racing.
36 cars took the green. Pole sitter Gloy, pursued by Ribbs, Al Mumma, and 78 Trans Am champ Greg Pickett in his number 6 Corvette. Teammates Ribbs and Hobbs quickly got by Gloy, who started to fall back with suspension problems. Then Mumma crashed heavy, and the yellow flag was out for 7 of 33 laps. On the restart, Hobbs assumes the lead, but back in the pack, Atlanta's Gene Felton in the red number 4 Firebird starts a charge that carries him within striking distance. Hobbs, whose engine began misfiring late in the race, couldn't keep the charging Georgian at bay, and Felton nips Hobbs by 2 lengths at the line. Pickett holds on for 3rd, Ribbs gets 4th, and David Hobbs had something to say about the loss.
Well, I had a bit of a trouble with an actor who drives a Datsun, Mr. Paul Newman, who had held me up a good bit when I tried to lap him.
Newman's version was a little different.
I don't think I blocked him. I think there was always about 50 or 60 feet between us. Only if I'd have known, it was him, I would have let him by right away. I don't like to do that.
Ferrari, the cars that carry that great motorsports name, are the objects of everyone's interest. For souvenir hunters, it matters not whether it be a past hero, flags, hats, or part of a current model, the Ferraris are the ones to watch. René Arnoux rose to the hometown pressure, putting his red 28 on the pole, while his teammate Patrick Tambay qualified 3rd. Splitting that duo, Nelson Piquet and his blue and white Brabham. But at the start, Piquet, left side of your screen, stalls. Cars go every which way around the stricken Brazilian, leaving Piquet in a sorry cloud of dust. Up front, the Ferraris were 1-2, chased by Brabham number 2 man Riccardo Patrese. Back at the start, a dejected Piquet got help from the marshals, but he was out of contention. Patrese, however, carried the Brabham colors high, first moving past Tambay for 2nd, then by Arnoux to take over the lead. That made it 4 turbo cars out front. Patrese in a BMW, the 2 Ferraris, and the turbo Renault of Alain Prost. Pit stops have come the rage in Formula One, and Arnoux was the first to make his. That left the battle to Patrese and Tambay, but as Arnoux exited the pits, Tambay also made his stop. Quick and efficient, both Ferraris were back at it in a hurry. That meant that Patrase's stop would have to be fast for him to keep the lead. When the Italian did make his stop on lap 33, it was quick, but still, Tambay sped by the pits and into the top spot. With the lead gone, Patrese exited the pits in true bonsai fashion. Didn't take him long to catch the leader, Tambay, and those two stayed glued together until lap 55.
Indianapolis is the only American automobile race where a full week of practice precedes qualifying and just drops tons of pressure, not only on the drivers, but also the teams. The barometer of competitive speed at Indianapolis this year, the magical 200-mile-per-hour mark. It's very elusive. Now it has become the standard. At least 13 teams have timed in at 200 miles per hour this year, and a handful of others on handheld stopwatches say that they've attained that mark also. The fastest of the lot so far has been the Atlanta-based Whittington team. This time, Don Whittington in his bright yellow number 91. He's been above 205 miles per hour most of the week.
I think the car's capable if we can get the engine to keep running. I think we can run a lot quicker.
The ritualistic quest for speed has taken its predictable toll in terms of incidents, the most serious of which so far this season has been the crash of 52-year-old Bob Harkey. Harkey, after brushing wheels with Mike Mosley in practice on Thursday, ground the last remaining old A.J. Foyt Coyote around the outside retaining wall here at the Speedway for about 1,400 feet. Harkey's injuries were critical, including a broken neck, but no paralysis is involved. Also crashing on Friday and suffering at least a broken leg was John Paul Jr. Earlier in the week, Johnny Rutherford crashed hard for the 4th time in the last 12 months, but by midweek, Rutherford was back at it again. When you think of the pole at Indianapolis, you think...
He was the preseason favorite, but going into round 3 last week at Sears, Andretti sorely needed to score big. He'd spun, then dropped out of the Riverside race the week before and came to Sears playing catch-up.
Right now, I'm 4th in points. I think if we do well here and maybe win, I think that'll put me near the front again, maybe even first. It depends how the other guys finish.
For the 3rd straight race, Andretti had won the pole, and after being outfoxed on the start in the previous 2 events, he was determined to get the jump this time, because the tight Sears Point circuit is notoriously hard to pass on. When the green flag fell, Michael pulled the trigger perfectly, as did Tommy Byrne, who scooted from 5th to 3rd. It was Andretti, then Roberto Moreno, Byrne, and series point leader John David Briggs, number 37, who struggled the whole race to keep within sight of the leaders. That's Ed Pym chasing Briggs. He eventually got by, only to blow a motor. Up front, Andretti was all alone, his Ralt RT4 handling perfectly, but the same could not be said for those behind him. Moreno's yellow Ralt was misfiring badly, understeering, and finally blistered a tire. A similar problem befell number 10 Byrne, and a bad clutch kept surprise Riverside winner Mark Moore, number 19, out of contention. Andretti stretched his lead out to 26 seconds eventually over Moreno and took his first checkered flag of the series, with Byrne coming home 3rd and Mike Rosen finishing 4th. Moreno's 2nd place put him in the series point lead, but he's out of money. And despite an offer to rent Andretti's backup car, Formula Mondial has likely seen the last of its point leader.
Going to be at Westwood in 2 weeks.
Now, it looks like it's the last race on the Mondial for me. I might be doing some races with Don Gurney with the Toyota cars. I'll be going to Charlotte next weekend, but that's about it.
We'll cover that Charlotte ago, while Jim Crawford, who had good 82 success in his Formula One conversion car, will be joined this year by fellow Englishman Jonathan Palmer in a similar mount. The big news, John Fitzpatrick brings his Group C Porsche 956 to the Can-Am Wars, though he'll have to turn down the turbo boost to get the required 3.75 miles per gallon. The ship went to England last Sunday with some surprising results. The famed Silverstone circuit hosted round 2 of the series, and the British, who thrive on big league road racing, flocked in to see the world's most exotic sports cars, including this Porsche, which was prepped for past world champ Alan Jones, out of retirement and happy to be back in a GT car.
I very much enjoy racing them, I must say. It's very relaxed and they're very friendly people, and they're good to drive, so, you know, I'd like to stick with it a bit longer.
But the scene stealer was this factory Porsche of Derek Bell and series rookie Stefan Beloff, the fastest thing to come out of Germany since the Messerschmitt. Beloff smashed the outright Formula One track record by 1 1/4 seconds, and the fiery redhead was obviously pleased. Starting on a wet track, the always fast Lancia of Michele Alboreto and Riccardo Patrese jumped to the lead. Then Teo Fabi and Piercarlo Genzani made it Lancia's 1-2, chased by a gaggle of Porsches. But despite their numbers, 8 in all, some of the German-built machines had problems. The top privateer in the race, Bob Wallach, got himself in trouble, but he does an admirable job of staying out of the catch fence, and he was able to continue. On the other hand, Alan Jones was carrying the Porsche colors right to the front, moving his number 21 through the field, and finally passing the Patrese Alboreto Lancia to take the lead. From there, it was all downhill for the Italians. First, Beloff and Bell grabbed third when the Fabi Genzani combo went to pit road with a misfire. Then the Patrese Alboreto car was also sidelined with mechanical problems. That shuffle produced a new leader, the #1 factory Porsche of Jackie Ickx and Jochen Mass, chased by none other than Bell and Beloff, running a steady race. And when Ickx and Mass made a final miscue, the team of destiny, Bell and Beloff, took the lead for good. Daytona 24-hour winner Wallach came back superbly after his spin, but his late charge couldn't touch the Anglo-German combination as Bell and Beloff sped to victory. The great moment for this youngster Beloff. Porsches dominate by sheer numbers, if nothing else. Early leader Jones held on to fifth despite some minor problems.
Rain has delayed opening round qualifying at the Brickyard. The Indianapolis forecast calls for rain throughout